In this update, we're watching two areas of disturbed weather in the tropics, as well as an intense heat wave happening for the Northeast. Let's take a look at the satellite picture this morning. Head south down towards the Caribbean. Look at all that moisture. It's just a very juicy air mass just been inundating much of the Yucatan Peninsula. Cancun has just been crushed with very heavy rainfall as of late. All this disturbed weather is finally moving out in the open waters of the Bay of Campeche, where we do have a tropical little entity down there into the southern portions of the Gulf of Mexico. You can see it spreading its tropical rains further north, and this tropical trough will be heading westbound and spreading the moisture back into Texas, and actually some much needed rain for them, while we have an intense heat wave unfolding across a good part of the Northeast, and then heavy rains for those areas across the Dakotas, into Minnesota, as well as into Wisconsin. But it's cold out there into the Northwest. In fact, yesterday, some of the higher elevations over 5,000 feet had snow flying in much of areas of Idaho into Montana, and they've got freezing conditions in some of the higher elevations as you're waking up this morning. But you can see where the ridge of high pressure is, much locked over across a good part of the central and eastern 2/3 of the U.S., and this is where we have the record heat is going to unfold again today for the Northeast. But further south, there is our first potential tropical cyclone of the season. Right now, it has some 40-mile-per-hour winds. It's not yet classified as a tropical storm, but it is forecasted to later on tomorrow as we get deeper. As this tries to kind of tighten up. But all indications, it will likely be making landfall in Mexico, but the heavier rains will spread well out of the center and spread into Louisiana and along into Texas, especially South Texas, with much needed rain. And that's not the only disturbance. We're watching yet another disturbance off the southeast coast. Remember last week, Florida, much of South Florida just got raked with very intense heavy rain. Yet we have another system coming back behind it with more tropical moisture funneling back in. And then yet even we have another one in the day 7 outlook that's going to replace this potential tropical cyclone and have yet another kind of a deja vu type setup with more tropical rains starting to build again down there into the southern portions of the Gulf of Mexico. You can see, heading into tonight, into tomorrow, we've got the very heavy rain will likely spread into Louisiana, into southeast Texas, into South Texas, those areas across Houston, Galveston, Victoria, especially like the Corpus Christi area, down into Brownsville, eventually swinging over into San Antonio. In the middle part of the country, they'll be dealing with some heavier rains across the upper Midwest, through Iowa, portions of Minnesota, as well as into Wisconsin. And then it's just nothing about the heat building. Yesterday, Toledo, Ohio checked in at 99 degrees, crushing the record high temperature. Numerous records will likely unfold today, with widespread 90s coming back into play. Even more records going to be broken today, and likely through tomorrow and even into Thursday. This ridge of high pressure is pretty much locked over this area for the next couple of days, while we be watching the tropics pulling that moisture in into a good part of the southern half of Texas, and then middle of the country. That's what we'll have, the conveyor belt of moisture. So right now we do have that slight risk for heavy rainfall unfolding across a good part of Kansas, back into southern portions of Nebraska here, as well as into Iowa, and pretty much the entire state of Minnesota gets crushed again with very heavy rain in portions of Wisconsin. But further south, there's complements of that potential tropical cyclone. Could be named Alberto, but that's going to spread in its tropical rains for the deep southern portions of the state, especially along the coastal regions, with flood watches in place across this region. But especially as this shifts into Mexico, these heavier rains will go into some of these drought-stricken areas where they desperately need the rain, down there in, say, the Corpus area, down in San Antonio, the Brownsville area. And I think this will likely start inundating a good part of even southern portions and, say, like the Del Rio area, because by the time we head into tomorrow, as that system comes ashore into Mexico, that will spread the much needed rains. Now the heavier rains will likely spread into Corpus, down into South Padre, into the San Antonio region, into Brownsville, those areas into Del Rio. As further north, they'll be looking for some of those heavier rains will spread a little bit further south, but you still have the ridge of high pressure underneath with all that sinking air. And I don't think it ends there, folks. So some of these areas, again, down there in Texas, these are areas that just been bone dry, severe drought unfolding across these areas. So this is actually a really welcome sign for heavy rainfall over the next 3 days. You can see where the drought map is, right? So we know much of central and eastern 2/3 have been inundated with a lot of heavy rain over the last 6 months. And those guys in southern Florida had that rainfall last week. This map will actually update on Thursday. So when it does, a good chunk of that will be deleted with all that heavier rains they experienced last week. But look where they need it the most, right? All the heavier rains will likely unfold across South Texas and to Southwest Texas. They're under that extreme to moderate drought to severe drought. Yes, this is definitely a good sign with heavy rainfall. And unfortunately, all the wildfires that broke out last night into New Mexico that's still ongoing, those areas are in a desperate drought as well. So I do feel over the next couple of days, they'll be missing out on a lot of the rain, but after that, they'll be getting back into the rain part. So here's where the high pressure is. You can see where all the sinking air is. Underneath that, you're not going to get much rainfall at all. It's going to be away from that ridge of high pressure. These areas across Kansas, Nebraska, back into Iowa, as well as into Minnesota, Wisconsin. Those areas in the Dakotas will likely pick up more heavy rain over the next couple of days. And then, of course, complements of that first disturbed weather down there in Texas with flooding rains of good 4 to 8 inches is definitely not out of the question. And then there's that other little disturbance that's going to impact Florida again, with not as intense as you saw last week, but still additional rain showers adding up to another couple of inches of rain over the coming days. But then I think by Friday, Thursday heading into Friday, some of that moisture will likely sneak into areas of eastern portions of New Mexico and put some welcome rains in that area. So this is actually a good sign. We're seeing this tropical development inundating some of these areas that have been just so drought stricken, as of late. But I think going into Friday, I think this ridge of high pressure will slowly start to back off for those areas into the northeast. They'll be starting to experience of those temperatures trying to come down from those mid to upper 90s. And as it does, and as this ridge of high pressure pulls away, that'll help again kind of lower the pressures underneath there into Cancun, back into the Yucatan and the southern portions of the Bay of Campeche. That's where we'll start to see again possible another little maybe tropical juicy air mass trying to form down there in that region. Because Friday, as the ridge of high pressure will keep extending further south, you can see underneath that white area, that's little to no rainfall. That's where the ridge of high pressure will likely be. On the outskirts of that, that's where the instability will be. So that's where you have kind of the juicy air mass, as you will, back into the Caribbean, just unfortunately again back into the Yucatan, the southern portions of the Gulf of Mexico, South Texas again, entering areas of New Mexico and swinging up and over that ridge. And yes, those are more rains back into the Dakotas, into Minnesota, into Wisconsin. So again, a lot of these same areas continue to get hit away from that ridge of high pressure. And I think that just continues as we head into the weekend with that little tropical disturbance, again, trying to get its act together like it is right now, likely heading back into Mexico again, putting the tropical rains, again, likely back into South Texas, and the rains further over the top, away from the ridge again, back into the Dakotas, as well as into Minnesota, into Wisconsin as well. And then going into Sunday, there's the ridge of high pressure. It's pretty much going to be locked back over to New Mexico and much of Texas and Oklahoma. And then underneath that, that's where the kind of the ridge over troubled waters is, right? You got the high pressure over the top, help lowers the pressure underneath, and that creates that kind of juicy air mass down there into the Gulf. And we'll be watching for that movement of that tropical moisture. But yes, it's likely going to impact some of the same areas, Florida again, into South Texas, into the deep south of Texas, with more kind of tropical juice impacting that area. And then again, as we head into that this weekend, the ensembles print another area, that same area that has the 20% from the NHC right now, and where they're getting potential tropical cyclone 1 for Wednesday landfall. We'll have another system trailing behind that one, and that one also has an 80% potential of trying to become another potential tropical storm, and likely possibly heading into portions of Mexico again and in portions of Texas. So there it is on Monday. So as the ridge of high pressure will likely expand over the top and north in Oklahoma, North Texas and Oklahoma, underneath you'll get that heavier rains pushing back into Florida again, as well as into the deep south of Texas. And away from the ridge, you'll finally have some rain and instability come back for those areas across the Northeast and New England and portions of Maine, where they are going to be experiencing record high temperatures over the next couple of days. But as soon as that high backs off, that'll force the rains back into play, and that will obviously cool you guys off by then. But you got a lot of heat to contend with between now and then. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit subscribe to my channel, and catch me next update, why I protect you before and after the storm.